former Chief Petty Officer Ethan Cross had been working as an independent security consultant in Denver, Colorado, for 9 months since leaving the Navy SEALs. At 40 years old, Ethan hadn't retired due to physical injury or catastrophic mission failure. He left because his marriage collapsed completely under the crushing weight of 15 years of deployments, missed anniversaries, psychological distance his wife couldn't bridge, and emotional unavailability that eroded their relationship beyond repair. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks before his retirement date. His ex-wife kept their house in Virginia Beach, along with most of their shared possessions. Ethan took his truck, his operational gear, and moved to Denver, where he knew no one and no one knew him. A deliberate geographic reset designed to escape memories and connections. The security consulting work paid well, but felt profoundly hollow. Assessing corporate security systems, writing threat assessments for executives who'd never face actual threats, teaching business leaders basic situational awareness in contexts that would never matter. He was trading hard-earned operational expertise for comfortable irrelevance, and the emptiness was consuming him slowly. His companion was Ranger, a 6-year-old Belgian Malinois who'd been Ethan's K-9 partner for 2 deployments spanning Iraq and Afghanistan. Ranger had specialized in combat search and rescue operations, trained to locate downed personnel under fire, detect survivors in collapsed structures following explosions, and navigate hostile terrain to find casualties when human searchers couldn't operate safely. Belgian Malinois were considered ideal for military working dog programs because of their high energy, exceptional sense of smell, trainability, agility, speed, work ethic, loyalty, and when needed, controlled ferocity. They were more compact than German Shepherds, but possessed superior intelligence, forming strong bonds with handlers and excelling at tasks requiring high levels of attention. When Ethan retired, Ranger retired with him under the military working dog adoption program. The Belgian Malinois still exhibited search behaviors constantly, alerting to distant sounds, investigating terrain anomalies during their morning runs in the Rocky Mountain foothills, maintaining the operational vigilance that had defined 7 years of military service. Ethan didn't redirect these behaviors because, honestly, watching Ranger search for missions that didn't exist mirrored his own experience. Highly trained, severely underutilized, and slowly losing purpose to comfortable civilian safety. On a freezing March morning, when temperatures hovered around 28 degrees and frost covered everything, Ethan was running a solo trail in Mount Falcon Park, a regular 8-mile loop he used to maintain fitness and burn off the insomnia that had plagued him since the divorce. Ranger ran, off-leash ahead, ranging with the disciplined freedom characteristic of military working dogs. At approximately 6:45 hours, 3 miles into the run, on a trail Ethan had completed twice weekly for months, Ranger suddenly stopped dead. Body rigid, head elevated, scanning environment, nostrils flaring, the unmistakable alert posture Ethan recognized from dozens of operational deployments. Ethan's tactical instincts activated immediately, despite 9 months of civilian life. Ranger didn't produce false alerts. 7 years of combat operations proved that conclusively. Ethan moved quickly to the dog's position and gave the operational command from their deployment days. "Show me." Ranger didn't bark or vocalize. Instead, he moved deliberately off-trail toward a rocky outcropping approximately 60 yards away, navigating carefully down a steep embankment covered in loose scree and exposed roots. Ethan followed, recognizing this as Ranger executing a trained search pattern toward confirmed human scent detection. 40 yards down the embankment, Ranger stopped beside what appeared to be a natural rock shelter, partially obscured by fallen pine branches. Ethan approached and saw what triggered Ranger's alert. A woman, approximately early 30s, wedged between two large boulders, heavily injured and unconscious. She was wearing winter hiking gear, insulated jacket, snow pants, hiking boots, but the clothing was torn and blood-soaked. Her positioning and the disturbed snow above suggested she fell from the trail edge during darkness, slid down the embankment, and became trapped between the boulders. Ethan's combat medic training overrode everything else: civilian identity, consulting work, emotional avoidance. He dropped to his knees beside her and began immediate assessment. Pulse, weak but present, at approximately 55 beats per minute. Breathing, shallow with crackling sounds indicating possible pneumothorax from broken ribs. Visible injuries, severe head trauma with massive hematoma and palpable depressed skull fracture. Compound fracture of the right tibia with bone exposed through torn pants. Frostbitten fingers indicating prolonged cold exposure. Signs of severe hypothermia with core temperature dangerously low. This woman had been here for hours, possibly overnight or longer, losing blood, going into shock, and freezing to death. Ethan performed rapid triage assessment. She needed trauma surgery and aggressive warming protocols he absolutely couldn't provide in the field, but her condition was so critical that she might not survive transport even if rescue arrived immediately. His location was 3 miles from the trailhead with spotty cell service. The tactical assessment was grim. Call 911 and wait 60-90 minutes for mountain rescue to organize and arrive, during which she'd likely die from hypothermia and shock, or attempt field stabilization and extraction himself, accepting massive risk of causing fatal injuries during movement. Ethan made a decision that changed everything. He wasn't calling for rescue yet. He was stabilizing her here, warming her, controlling bleeding, and only then making the call. Because calling now meant exposing her to another 90 minutes of below-freezing temperatures while he waited for help, and 90 minutes was likely longer than she had. It was the opposite of wilderness first aid protocol, which says call immediately and wait for professional rescue. But protocol assumes the casualty can survive the wait time. This woman couldn't. Ethan applied aggressive field trauma management, using techniques from combat medicine. Used his belt to create an improvised tourniquet above the compound fracture to control arterial bleeding. Packed the wound with sterile gauze from his trail-running medical kit. Stabilized her neck using his jacket and trekking poles as an improvised cervical collar. Then he did something that violated every cold weather injury protocol. He stripped off his insulated layers and wrapped them around her, then positioned Ranger directly against her torso to provide mammalian body heat transfer, the same technique they'd used keeping wounded operators alive during cold weather extractions. For 30 minutes, Ethan maintained this position, monitoring her vitals continuously, talking to her even though she was unconscious, using his own body heat and Ranger's warmth to slowly raise her core temperature from critically hypothermic ranges toward survivable levels. Belgian Malinois were highly sensitive to their handlers' emotions and could pick up on mood changes quickly, making them excellent working dogs. Ranger maintained position against the woman's torso, providing continuous warmth despite the uncomfortable cold. Ethan's own body temperature dropped dangerously. He was in a technical running shirt in 28-degree weather, but he maintained position because this was what combat medics did: prioritize the casualty even when it cost the medic. At minute 32, the woman's eyes fluttered open briefly. She was disoriented, in severe shock, but conscious enough to register Ethan's presence. "Don't move," he said calmly. "You fell. You're hurt badly. I'm a Navy SEAL, retired. This is Ranger. We've got you. You're going to be okay." It was a promise he couldn't guarantee, but it was what casualties needed to hear when they woke up injured and afraid. Now that she was partially conscious and her core temperature had risen from immediately fatal to critically low, Ethan made the call to 911. He provided GPS coordinates, described injuries requiring immediate air medical transport, explained he'd already initiated field warming and hemorrhage control. The dispatcher connected him to Mountain Rescue and Flight for Life. Response time: 45 minutes minimum due to the technical terrain and need to coordinate helicopter landing zones. Ethan continued treatment while they waited, maintained her airway, monitored for signs of increased intracranial pressure from the skull fracture, kept her immobilized to prevent spinal cord injury. Ranger maintained position against her torso, providing continuous warmth. At minute 20 of waiting, the woman regained fuller consciousness and began crying, not from pain, but from fear and shock. Ethan did what he'd done with wounded operators. He kept talking, kept her focused on his voice, kept her fighting to stay conscious, because unconscious meant her body was giving up. Mountain Rescue arrived at minute 43 with technical rope equipment and a litter for extraction. The flight medic who assessed her condition looked at Ethan, shirtless in below-freezing weather, shaking uncontrollably from cold exposure he accepted to keep her warm, and asked the question that defined everything. "You kept her warm using your own body heat and your dog for 43 minutes? You could have died from hypothermia yourself. Why didn't you just call us and wait?" Ethan's answer was simple, but reflected a truth he'd been avoiding since his divorce. Because calling and waiting meant she'd die. Keeping her warm meant I'd be uncomfortable, but she'd survive. I chose her survival over my comfort. Sometimes that's the only choice that matters. The woman was extracted via technical rope rescue and airlifted immediately to St. Anthony Hospital in Denver. Ethan was treated for moderate hypothermia and released after 4 hours of warming protocols and observation. He provided his statement to rescue authorities and Jefferson County Sheriff's deputies. Routine trail run, dog alerted, found injured hiker, stabilized, and called for rescue. He declined media interviews, refused recognition, and tried to return to his normal routine of security consulting and emotional avoidance. 4 days later, Ethan received a call from Detective Lisa Park with Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. "The woman you found is Dr. Sarah Reeves, 33, an emergency medicine physician at Denver Health," Detective Park explained. "She went for an early morning hike 3 days before you found her and never returned. Her fiancé reported her missing that evening. We deployed search teams but couldn't locate her in that terrain. The snowfall that night obscured tracks and scent trails. Based on her injuries and our investigation, we believe she was hiking at dawn, slipped on ice near the trail edge, and fell approximately 40 feet down the embankment. She couldn't climb back up due to her leg fracture." Ethan processed this information. Sarah was missing for 3 days in below-freezing conditions and only survived because Ranger detected her from 60 yards away through terrain that had defeated professional search efforts for 72 hours. The detective continued. Her doctors say the hypothermia was the biggest threat. Core temperature was 85 degrees when she arrived at the hospital. Another hour of cold exposure would have caused cardiac arrest. Your decision to warm her using your body heat and your dog saved her life. She's critical but stable. She wants to meet you when she's conscious enough for visitors. 2 weeks later, Ethan visited Sarah in the ICU. She was bandaged extensively, recovering from multiple surgeries, but alert and articulate. Her first word shocked him. "They told me you're a retired SEAL, that you stripped off your clothes in freezing weather to keep me warm, that your dog lay against me for 40 minutes, providing heat. Why would you do that for a stranger?" Ethan struggled to answer honestly. "Because that's what we did downrange. Keep casualties alive until medevac arrives. You were the casualty. Ranger and I were the only assets on scene. We did what we were trained for." But Sarah saw through the deflection. "I'm an ER doctor. I know cold weather injury protocols. What you did was dangerous. You could have died from hypothermia yourself. Standard wilderness first aid says call for help and maintain your own safety first. You ignored that. Why?" Ethan finally spoke the truth he'd been avoiding since his divorce ended. "Because for 9 months I've been going through motions, consulting work that doesn't matter, running trails alone, existing without purpose. Then Ranger found you, and I had a choice. Follow protocols that prioritize my safety over your survival, or do what SEALs are trained to do, whatever it takes to bring the casualty home alive. I chose the mission over my comfort. It's the first time in 9 months I felt like I mattered." Sarah's response changed everything. "I've been researching you, your operational record, your K-9 partner's capabilities. You extracted wounded operators during combat. You have skills that could save lives in civilian contexts, but you're running a security consulting business and trail running alone. That's not retirement. That's suppression of ability. What if there was a way to use what you and Ranger can do systematically, not accidentally?" Over the following weeks, Sarah, still recovering but determined, developed a detailed proposal with Ethan, a rapid response K9 search and rescue team for urban and wilderness environments, focused on locating missing persons and accident victims where traditional search methods failed. The concept leveraged Rangers' military search and rescue training, which far exceeded civilian SAR dog capabilities in terms of detection range, endurance, and performance under stress. Belgian Malinois excelled at tracking suspects and missing persons, with their keen sense of smell and agility making them perfect for search and rescue operations. Studies showed they scored significantly higher in obedience and defense compared with German shepherds. The turning point came when Sarah secured initial funding from Denver Health's Emergency Medicine Research Foundation, recruited emergency physicians willing to develop protocols, and asked Ethan to lead the operational development. His first response was resistance. He left the SEALs and his marriage behind specifically to avoid high-stakes commitments that demanded everything. But Sarah countered with observation he couldn't dismiss. "You came alive the moment Ranger found me. You made decisions under pressure. You accepted personal risk for someone else's survival. That's not something you left behind with your career. That's who you are. The question isn't whether you're capable, it's whether you're willing to stop hiding from the person you actually are." Ethan committed to the project, driven by recognition that saving Sarah's life gave him back something his divorce took, proof that he was capable of commitment that mattered when stakes were highest. Over 6 months, Ethan developed Metro K9 Rapid Response, small teams of retired military working dogs paired with handlers equipped for urban and wilderness search operations, positioned to deploy when traditional search efforts were delayed or failing. He recruited 3 other retired SEAL K9 handlers, each with Belgian Malinois or German Shepherds trained for combat search operations. Belgian Malinois were preferred due to their compact frames, high energy levels, trainability, and ability to work tirelessly. The organization focused on cases where missing persons were in immediate danger, injured hikers, lost children, accident victims in remote locations, situations where every hour delayed meant reduced survival probability. 12 months after finding Sarah in that rocky outcropping, Ethan's organization had completed 31 searches across Colorado, cases where missing persons would have died before traditional rescue arrived, but survived because ranger or other trained military working dogs located them within critical time windows. Each dog brought capabilities that exceeded civilian SAR standards: detection range, endurance, ability to work under pressure without being distracted, and strong bonds with handlers that enabled seamless communication. Sarah fully recovered and completed a fellowship in wilderness medicine, becoming the medical director for Ethan's organization. She and Ethan developed a relationship built on shared understanding. Both had nearly died to circumstances and choices, Sarah to her fall, Ethan to the emotional isolation that was consuming him, and both found renewal through partnership that honored their capabilities without demanding they suppress who they are. 18 months after the rescue, Ethan received an unexpected call from his ex-wife. She'd seen media coverage of his search and rescue work. Her words were careful but genuine. "I couldn't reach you when you were a SEAL. You were physically present but emotionally gone. But watching you talk about this new work, you're present now, you're engaged. I'm proud of you." It wasn't reconciliation. Their marriage was permanently done, but it was closure, acknowledgement that Ethan had found something that made him whole in ways their relationship couldn't. 2 years after Ranger found Sarah in that rocky outcropping, Ethan and Ranger were featured in a documentary about military working dogs transitioning to civilian service. The filmmaker asked the question that captured everything. You left the SEALs, moved to a new city, started over. Then your dog found someone dying, and you made decisions that changed your entire life. How do you explain that? Ethan's answer became the documentary's foundation. "I didn't leave the SEALs because the work was wrong. I left because I couldn't balance that work with being a husband. I thought retirement meant stopping completely. But Ranger taught me something. You don't stop being what you're trained to be. You just find new applications." He found Sarah because he's a search and rescue dog. That doesn't turn off in civilian life. Belgian Malinois are bred and trained to work, with high energy and exceptional capabilities that need outlets. I saved her because I'm trained to keep casualties alive. That doesn't turn off either. What changed my life wasn't finding her. It was recognizing that I'd been trying to be someone I'm not. I'm not a security consultant who used to be a SEAL. I'm a SEAL who found new missions worth executing. That's not a career change. That's just clarity about who I actually am. The documentary included footage of Ranger working search operations, the Belgian Malinois navigating difficult terrain with exceptional agility, detecting scents from extraordinary distances, maintaining focus despite distractions. 3 years after that March morning, Ethan had expanded Metro K-9 rapid response to 4 states, trained 9 teams, and documented 47 lives saved in situations where traditional rescue response times exceeded survival windows. He also began speaking at military transition conferences, using his experience to help other veterans recognize that skills developed during service could find meaningful civilian application. "I spent 9 months suppressing everything that made me who I am," he told one audience. "I thought civilian life meant becoming someone different, but Ranger showed me that military working dogs don't retire from being working dogs. They just need new missions that use their training. Belgian Malinois need intensive exercise and mental stimulation, or they exhibit destructive behaviors. The same applies to operators. We don't stop being warriors because we leave the military. We just need missions that matter." Ranger, now 8 years old and still operational, completed 12 to 15 searches annually while training younger military working dogs transitioning to civilian search and rescue work. 4 years after finding Sarah, Ethan received recognition from the National Association for Search and Rescue for innovative integration of military working dog capabilities into civilian search and rescue operations. During his acceptance speech, he was asked, "What makes military working dogs like Ranger different from civilian SAR dogs?" His answer became widely cited in search and rescue training programs. Belgian Malinois and other military working dogs are trained for conditions that exceed civilian parameters. They work under fire through explosions in extreme environments. They're bred and trained for high energy, exceptional sense of smell, trainability, agility, speed, work ethic, and loyalty. Ranger detected Sarah from 60 yards away in freezing conditions after she'd been missing for 3 days. Civilian search dogs are excellent, but military working dogs have capabilities developed for combat that translate exceptionally well to civilian search and rescue when given the right applications. The heavily injured woman Ranger found in March didn't just survive because of Ethan's decisions. She became the catalyst that proved warriors don't stop being warriors when they retire from military service. They just need to find missions that require what they have to offer, accept that skills don't expire when wars end, and understand that sometimes the most important decisions are the ones that risk everything you have left to save something you just discovered matters more than comfort, safety, or the protection you've been hiding behind since the life you knew fell apart and left you wondering if anything would ever matter again.